I'm delighted to be able to present our wonderful director, producers, who took the challenge on International Women's Month to highlight women as actors, directors, playwrights, and voices. Deana Culp is fairly new to Santa Fe. She ran a theater in Ecuador, sorry, Central America. And she has invited two of her actors from her company.
Actually, we have 3, 4, 5.
Oh, wow, wonderful. Oh, happy. How are you?
These two came from Ecuador,
This
just
is
to be in the
wonderful.
show.
So we're thrilled to have international talent here as well. And Talia Pura, in case you didn't know, is president of Theater Santa Fe. She is also a playwright, an actor, an acrobat, and she's in the Dramatist Guild, which is why she is gathering all of these wonderful, fearless female voices, playwrights, a dozen of them, and I'm going to let each of them tell you about the process that brought these things to life, because producing and directing at the same time is never easy. So Gina, I'm going to let you start off and explain how this came to be and all the different iterations throughout the world. So you go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. I want to make a public gratitude statement to Jennifer, because I've been in Santa Fe for 2 years, and she was one of the first persons I met. I went to a class, we ran it together, and of the whole theater network, she was the first person, and she has been so supportive and promoting, and she's just one of those people that just wants you to be successful. So I really wanted to publicly acknowledge her for that. And everybody. And thank you to the Lovers Club for having us. 7. There's a history of how it came to be, and also a history of how I got involved, and so I'll kind of try to go through it as quickly and make sense of it. There's an organization, an NGO in Washington, D.C. called the Vital Voices Global Leadership Network, and they were founded in 1997 and have grown and grown, and their goal is to acknowledge women leadership all over the world. So they have field people out checking and seeing what's going on, and every year they honor a group of women, sometimes 3, 4, whatever amount, and then they support them in order for them to go back to their countries to continue their work. It might be helping them with some business sense, helping them learn how to be active in government, networking, something they can go back, pay it forward, kind of this double dip thing to help them do that, and they've been very successful. So in 2006, they decided to take a group of 7 women that they had recognized globally, and I'm not sure who promoted it, but somehow they said, let's tell the story of these 7 women. And so they decided the way to do it would be to invite 7 female playwrights, and they found 7 award-winning playwrights, very well known, and each of them spent almost a year, quite a while, with each of the 7 women, interviewing them and taking their stories. Then the 7 playwrights got together with their interview stories and said, okay, how can we put this into a 95-minute mixed monologue documentary of these stories? And because they're so brilliant, they really put it together like a play would be, as far as telling the stories mixed together. It's not one person at a time tells her whole story. They've mixed them together and put it together in a way like you would write a play, where you're going to have your conflict, and they each go through that piece. They have their climactic experiences and then their resolutions. And it's done that way with all of the stories. So I have found it really brilliantly written in that respect. So in 2008, it was first presented, and it was written to be read. there's a woman, well, Diane von Furstenberg promoted it for the first showing in New York City on Martin Luther King Day in 2008. And then a woman in Sweden took it on to take it around Europe. And it was written to be read in any language, by any gender, any nationality. And it has been translated to 27 different languages, all those stories. So it's been done in Japanese and, you know, any language. And it's also been done by parliament officials, artists, NATO-shaped generals. 7 men sat on stage, and each of them took one of the stories and read them to an audience. It was really powerful. And they're told in first person. And so it was just, it's pretty amazing. If you go to YouTube and you put in Shape NATO Generals 7, you can see some clips of that. So the woman from Sweden started taking it around to towns in Europe, and she would go to the dignitaries of the town, and she said, you know, if there are these women's issues going on, it's the officials that are going to be able to help correct them. So she would go to the officials and have them read 7 to people of the community. And so that's really how it got started. And it was always read, and the intent, and it's written right there in the script, that it doesn't matter who tells it. The people telling the story doesn't matter, it's the story that matters. So any nationality and gender, I just saw recently in Montreal, it was done with the shadow of a man and a woman took each of the 7 pieces and took turns reading. So it's just been done a whole lot of different ways. It's been done in 7 countries, I think. So it's been all over the world since it started in 2008 and continues to be done. I heard of it when I was living in New Delhi, India. I was teaching in international schools, wound up in New Delhi in 2000, and one of the English teachers at the international school where I was had talked to someone who had the script, and she thought it'd be a great idea to do it. So after summer vacation, she caught me and said, oh, I have a play I want you to read. And she knew I'd been doing theater before. I said, Patricia, I don't have time. School is really busy, I don't have time. She said, just read it. Just read it. And see what you think. So I did. Over Christmas vacation, I read it, and it was like a big fish hook in my mouth that, yeah, I'm hooked. And so it just became really dear to me. We did it in India, in English, several times, and then when I finished teaching in India, I moved to Cuenca, Ecuador to retire, and it was always on my mind. It's like there was no theater in Cuenca at the time, English-speaking theater, and so I started meeting women, just, you know, casually, and I would talk about 7. And so many women there had either been involved with some kind of women's group or some kind of activism or something, and as I talked to people, I would tell them about 7, and there were so many that said, yes, I would love to do it, but I have never acted. I'm not an actor. I said, you won't have to act. When you get to know these women and their stories, there won't be any acting because you will feel their story when you tell it. And so that's what we did. And 2 of them are here tonight. They flew from Ecuador so they could be part of 7 here in Santa Fe. And Karima is also here, she's in it, and Lori, and Jennifer and Talia, so almost the whole cast is here. So I was really excited to be able to do it here. In Ecuador, we prepared it in English, and there's a group of expats enough where I think eventually we had maybe about 200 or so people that saw it. And then I thought, gosh, I was looking for a place to do it. I didn't have a theater or anything. And so I thought, if I'm going to find a venue, why would someone in Ecuador say, oh, sure, do something in English at our little theater? None of the Ecuadorians can come because it's in English. So I thought, well, we'll just do it in Spanish too. So I started recruiting some of the local professional women who were very excited to be part of it. And so I was directing it in English and in Spanish at the same time, different nights. If I ever do that again, someone shoot me. And so we did it as a community service project project to the Ecuadorian community in Spanish, and they really responded. And I want to mention something about what hearing these stories does and why it's important to me, because you never know what the result is going to be from them. When I was working with the expat women, a lot of them had traveled around the world, and it's like, oh yeah, I've been to Afghanistan and Pakistan, oh yeah, Guatemala. And so I think when they saw it, the reaction was kind of a global reaction, like, gosh, you know, that's going on in Afghanistan, I've been watching that on the news. And then when we did it in Spanish, I don't think the Ecuadorian community cared too much about some of these countries. I mean, you know, Ecuador has got its own issues, and all those countries are so far away, maybe a lot of the people hadn't traveled. But I think what happened to that audience as they walked out, that something touched them personally, like, wow, my niece is really being abused. We need to pay attention to some of this. I think it hit a little more personally. And a young Ecuadorian woman who worked with me when we were doing it in Spanish, gorgeous, young, educated Ecuadorian woman, very independent. And after we finished it, she told me this a few days later. She was walking down a street, and as kind of happens there, she passed a young man who did the whole down to her. And she stopped, and she turned around, and she said, "What did you say?" And he just laughed. He said, "Nothing." And she turned around and she said, "Yes, you did." And so he kept on going, so she followed him. And he picked up his pace a little, you know, because usually the girls just ignore it. And so she followed him, and in about a block ahead, there was a female policewoman. That's redundant. And at the time, there was a really big push on harassing women. Mm-hmm. And so she called the policewoman over, and she said, "This guy is harassing me." And so the policewoman actually took him in and said to her, "You'll need to come with us." And she said, "No problem." So they went to the station, he was questioned, of course denied it, and eventually got a big, you know, stern talking to, and if we ever hear you, see you, do anything. And so she contacted me to tell me that happened, and she said, "No man will ever treat me badly again." So I think, you know, from the groups that this has, where it's been and the different audiences, that people will take away something, whether it's activism, I'm going to get involved, I'm going to support some women's groups, or personally. And for me, I really examine, like, why am I so attached to this play? I grew up on a ranch in South Dakota with 3 sisters, so we were 4 girls. There was no gender identity at all about who goes and drives the tractor, who rides the horses, who cooks. We did everything. And we grew up, I think because of that, really independent. And so in a lot of the countries where I've lived teaching in international schools, a lot of them have been developing countries, and I've seen how women are treated and how women, in many of them, don't feel like they have a voice. And so I feel like if there's something I can do to help women have a voice, that's what I want to do, and that's kind of been my mission with it. So that's how it came to be and how
That's wonderful.
I got into it, and I'm really glad to be able to do it in Santa Fe. The group of women I've met, it's been really wonderful, and I probably wouldn't have met them because I was, you know, finding people, and Jennifer, I'd say, "Jennifer, do you know of anybody?" Or, "I saw this name, you know them?" And so it was wonderful to start to get to know women here and have this great cast of women who are really now, I think, devoted to getting these stories told. So that's, I guess, kind of the history of Southern.
That's terrific. Well, Talia, would you explain how Fearless Female Voices came to be, and just what it took to put it all together?
Sure, absolutely. Well, you gave me a really good segue about 30 seconds from the end. She mentioned voices, giving women a voice. And of course, mine, Fearless Female Voices, is attempting to do just that. I was interviewed by a magazine this afternoon for it, and she said, "Why do you have 12 plays? Why do you have so many?" I I said, because I want to give women a voice. I want to be as inclusive as possible. And so that's why there are 12, which is a lot, but it will go quickly because there are only 10 minutes. They are limited to 10 minutes. And the afternoon starts at 1. It will be a little more than 2 hours, but I don't know that we'll actually reach 3 hours. We'll see how it all goes. So the festival actually began, it's produced by my own theater company called Blue Ribbon Theater. And I started it in honor of International Women's Day and had 2 of these festivals before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, I could have done it on Zoom. I was doing a whole lot of other people's Zoom projects and decided that I just didn't want to do another Zoom. There were a lot going on. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm the president of Theater Santa Fe, and I initiated the theater walk. So you could say that Fearless Female Voices is kind of an offshoot. It's kind of my shtick. I like to bring people together. I like to provide venues and opportunities because there are so many talented people that are not producers. We were talking about how difficult it is to produce as well. So you can be the best playwright in the world, but if you're lousy at schmoozing and you're too busy writing to make a lot of submissions for other theaters to produce your work or other festival produce your work, you've got these great plays that nobody's ever heard. Plays can be read, but they're really meant to be seen. And so I feel like it's one of my goals in life is to produce so that other people that don't normally produce for themselves have an opportunity. So the first 2 years that we did Fearless Female, I actually did it because the first year I heard something come out of DC that I don't remember the name of. It was female something, but it was definitely a playwrights festival. And I wanted to call my festival Fearless Female, but I thought I was obliged to follow the national branding. I found out after we were done that in fact that was proprietary and was just in DC. Okay, great. I didn't really want to use that name in the first place. So next time it was called Fearless Female. And I think that it takes a lack of fear, it takes overcoming fear, it takes a lot of bravery to see your work on a stage as a playwright. So this is a festival that I could have easily put together by simply going and finding famous plays and plays that have been done before and plays that are out there in the public sphere and just put them on and produce them all. But I thought, no, that's not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is providing a venue for other playwrights who are sitting in solitary writing their plays and giving them a chance to see that yes, they can be producers. So when I put the call out for this, I said playwright producers. I didn't say I'm looking for your plays. I'm looking for you if you would like to do this. Now, full disclosure, the first 2 years were Santa Feans only. In fact, I had some playwrights from Albuquerque that said, oh, I really want to do this. I said, I'm really sorry. I may open it up one day, but right now, it was really easy to fill an auditorium, to fill a program with just Santa Fe playwrights. We've got a lot of really good female playwrights. And I feel badly a little bit for some of my male colleagues, and there are very good playwrights who are male. I said, it's just too great a title. Sorry. Next time, I do a lot of other things. Next time it's for you, but this one is for females. And it is in honor of International Women's Day. Mm-hmm. And I have to mention too, my mother happened to be born on International Women's Day. Mm-hmm. So I'm always doing sort of a double honor. This Wednesday, tomorrow, mm-hmm. the actual International Women's Day is March 8th. And it happens to be her 92nd birthday. Mm-hmm. And she's doing very well. She lives independently. She drives herself, and no, it's not scary. She's completely independent. She gigs at old folks' homes. She's a concert pianist level of player, and she teaches. She's on the sub list. And anyway, that's her, and she's always provided an incredible role model for what you can do. And my motto in life, as I age, has become: if you never stop, you never have to. And I apply that to, I guess, everything that I do. I have also applied it to parenting, something that I had planned on on stopping, but life doesn't always go the way you plan, so I do have a 5-year-old. That's another story. It certainly applies to my acrobatic work. It's no more difficult to climb silks now than it was 15 years ago if you never stop. If I stopped and waited for 15 years, I'd feel it. I'm fine. And so, coming back to this festival, 12 playwrights decided to bring their work here. I opened it up when I said full disclosure. Where I was actually going with that is that it used to be all Santa Fe, and now I've completely opened it up. As the ambassador of the Dramatists Guild, I'm always very aware of the playwrights all across the country, and it's also a venue. It's a place where you can put announcements. So I put it into the Dramatists Guild list of submission opportunities, but I made it very clear what the criteria was, that I expected them to travel to Santa Fe. But Santa Fe is a destination. Do you want an excuse to come to Santa Fe and see your work? I have paid to bring my work to New York City several times. I've brought my work to Stockholm, to Cape Town. It depends on the opportunity. Is it worth spending the money to get yourself there? Because it's often a festival where there are some expectations for you to put out some of the money. Mind you, I was also a university professor and I had a fund to do that, which I don't have. Different lifetime. But anyway, it's a matter of asking people, is it worth coming to Santa Fe with your play? Would you like to do that? If so, here's the venue. And so I've got a few out-of-town people that are coming. I've got someone from New York City. There is a play coming from South Carolina and another from Virginia. And I even have somebody internationally, somebody named Aya, who happens to be in Albuquerque as we speak, and was looking around for a theater to produce her full-length play that I gather she's touring the world with. I haven't met her yet. But she has a one-woman show, and so I said, no, I can't produce your work, but I can give you 10 minutes if you'd like to give the audiences an excerpt. So we have a wide range. And as it happened, simply coincidentally, I landed up with 12, and half of them are solo pieces. In most cases, that means that the female playwright is also presenting her own work, like the woman from Poland, but not always. One young Santa Fean woman has written a really interesting, gripping, fabulous monologue that's going to be presented by Nicholas Ballas. She wrote an old man, one woman show. So it's not necessarily the woman's story, it's whatever they want to write. And the other half of them have a multiple cast. Usually that means 2, but there's a few with 3 or 4, and I happen to be directing one for the woman from Virginia, which has 5 and still needs some doubling up. It is probably the most complex 10-minute complete play I've ever read.
That many.
And so that's fun. That's fun to see, because it doesn't, just because it's only 10 minutes doesn't mean it has to be simplistic. You could get a lot into 10 minutes. And in the spirit of 10 minutes only, I had told everyone they had a very strict 10-minute deadline and that they had to stop. I'm not exactly going to take on a hook, but it does have to stay 10 minutes. My own play that I'm putting on the festival happened to be a 15-minute play because I wrote it for a 15-minute festival. So I thought, well, you better do it yourself. Oh, and then just to make it interesting, I really thought I'd better make it 10 minutes only because my play is second last. So with everybody sitting through 10 plays, I can't put on a 15. It would be so unfair to everybody. So I had my 5-year-old do the draw. I put everybody's names in a bucket because programming something like that, it doesn't matter how carefully. I could have agonized over each one of these topics and tried to have a flow and said which one would be best following this one, and you can't do those back to back, and then I've got an actor who's doing 2 of them. I could have driven myself crazy. Instead, I put it all into a hat, and I said the name, and I said whether it was multi or solo, and my 5-year-old picked them out, read out the names, while I videotaped it so that I could post it so nobody could say that I rigged it in any way. Halfway through, I said, you know, you can mix it up again, because he hadn't picked my name yet. And I said, you know, take from the bottom, do whatever you want. He picked me second last. Second last, he said, oh, Talia, that's you. You know, because he hadn't really appreciated the fact that I was in the mix. Anyway, so I took my 15-minute play and I got it down to 10 minutes. Damned if I don't like it better. That happens. That can can happen. And
She liked it better.
I liked it better. It just has a different energy because it has a different flow. I took out some of the responses that really were beautiful and introspective and gave the play breath. They're gone, so now the play moves. I like it better. I think it works. It worked the other way just fine, but it works like this too. So it is now 10 minutes. And yeah, I hope that you all come. I do have a visual. There are cards in the lobby. It looks like this. This particular image, I randomly at a thrift store found a package of Nepal flags of goddesses. And so this is just my photograph of that little flag that's about this big. That's in a row of goddesses. And I decided she was my favorite one, and she would make a good poster. When I was in Nepal, I tried to find more packages because I really like these flags, and I knew other people would too. I guess it's a tourist export thing. I didn't find them anywhere. However, that's where the image came from, and it starts at 1 o'clock, and it is just by donation. A couple of reasons for that. We get a real sweetheart deal for being at the mall. We're at the Fashion Outlet Mall.
Talia, would you explain about building a stage?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you. So, Fashion Outlet Mall, excuse me, I first was made aware of how many empty spaces there were at the Fashion Outlet Mall and how lovely the manager was. I'm going to say fully 5 years ago. I happened to be sitting in the lobby of Adobe Rose Theater, and a gentleman was trying to interest Maureen, who was running the Adobe Rose, in the idea of dinner theater at the Fashion Outlet Mall. I didn't know anything about the Fashion Outlet Mall, but hey, I'm always up for a project. I went, oh, is this dude got money? Is this what we're talking about? If he's got money, I'll do a play. So I went with him and looked at a possible space. That project didn't go anywhere, but I did see what is empty at the mall and meet Netta, who's fabulous. And so I kept that in the back of my head, but we already had a theater walk going in this neighborhood. And at that point, we had not only Argos's 2 great spaces, and at that point Adobe Rose, but we also had the Playhouse that had 2 venues because they were renting space down the street. And we had a bunch of businesses that were open to us, and we managed to, I think at one point, what's the most venues we've ever had? 14? 16? I don't even remember. A lot. And lots of companies, and we flip-flop plays every half hour, and 2 companies shared a venue. It was, my real dream is to have a fringe festival there. I have a huge fringe background in my life, and I've done lots and lots of fringes, and I know how they work, and I know that Santa Fe would be a great place for a fringe. But, unlike Canada, you don't have state-sponsored theater. And so the biggest theater in town, I came from Winnipeg, a city the size of Albuquerque, and there are 7 sponsored theaters in town, size of Albuquerque. So one of them seats about 1,000, and then it sort of goes down from there. But at one point I came this close to getting my play on that stage. Even 12 years ago, the royalties for me as a playwright would have been 50 grand for that one play. So that's what we're talking about. That's what happens when governments support the arts. Sure, they have other fundraising, and sure they have ticket pricing, but that's the difference. And it was that theater that ran the Fringe Festival. So they had the infrastructure. They could hire a dude to work that full-time thing year-round. So it's a completely different animal. So I found out very quickly that it wasn't really reasonable for a volunteer board, such as Theatre Santa Fe, to do a full-fledged Fringe Festival. We might one day. I haven't given up the idea. But in the meantime, I said, why don't we do a walk? Just a one afternoon walk. We could handle that. We could do that, and people would come. And they have. We've had up to 800 people at a walk. So in the back of my mind, I'm still always thinking, oh, the Fashion Outlet Mall would be great, because you're not walking down the street. So after the pandemic, I saw an opportunity because a lot of the spaces that we used in this neighborhood just didn't exist anymore. We still had a few really nice theaters like this one and the lab, but we didn't have the businesses that put us on the back room or do a brewery that had us upstairs, and we just didn't have enough venues. And when you've got the venues far enough away that people have to be left at least 10 minutes to get there comfortably, and people with mobility issues are really going to be limited as to what they see, you know, then you have to, 2 an hour is plenty. However, in the Fashion Outlet Mall, where we are now, we've had 2 walks out there now, and people have loved it because you're walking across the courtyard, you're walking next door. And it's also very equal because all the venues are shite. When we had it here, some people had great venues like this one, and some people were in the back room of cacao chocolate, which was great, and it was so nice to smell the chocolate brewing, but it was tough. You know, we had these venues that were really make do, and we did the best we could. But they had zero tech, where people that were presenting here had full tech. So now we're in the Fashion Outlet Mall, and nobody has tech. You walk in, it's you and your audience, just do theater. And so that has been extremely successful. But then I continued the dream and said to the mall manager, what if Theater Santa Fe had a more or less permanent presence here? We could do great things. Because they did really love us. The theater walk, I think the Sunglasses Hut reported that he did more business that day than he had in the whole month, easily. So people coming to the mall is a very good thing. And I think Poor Things are down to 6 or is it 7 stores that are actually open out of what, 20?
3 or 4
maybe? So they really need some life in there. So in the meantime, because of our sweetheart deal, we're also on a basically 30-day eviction notice. So that makes things a little bit interesting. But things move pretty slowly, I find. So I'm thinking 3 to 5 years. This is weird. We'll see. In the meantime, yes, we have made a black box. So now my egalitarian view of everybody getting the same terrible venue has kind of been destroyed because now there's a venue that's actually kind of nice. We are making do like crazy, and Argos has been absolutely invaluable. He brought over a huge big red velvet curtain, and so now we have a division between the audience and the lobby, because this unit is 6,000 square feet. It's fabulous. We have now got the best dressing rooms in town. It was a loft. There are 10 change rooms. And so everybody gets their own dressing room with a seat and a rack and a mirror. You know, so that part is really, really nice. Then we put a little hole in the wall, just a little doorway with a big mirror that can cover it up when we need to, so that actors can get from those nice dressing rooms to the bathrooms in the back. A little tiny modification. Easy to fix, sort of. And we got, John Flax gave me the idea for a stage, a poor man's sprung floor. So Argos and I went dumpster diving one day. I phoned Absolute Flooring, and they said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, we're doing a house at a Quail Run this afternoon. Argos, are you available? Where's your truck? And he helped me haul all this carpeting that came from a house that was just big enough that we now have a cushioned floor. So the underlay, the carpet goes upside down to provide a smooth surface. Thin layer of masonite, which me and my 5-year-old taped all the seams up and painted. So it's taped to the tile floor, so we no longer have a white tile floor to perform on. It's black. And it is 19 feet wide and, sorry, it is 39 feet wide and 19 feet deep. We actually can do dance on that floor. And Argos brought over some poles this afternoon, and I'm busy creating the wings so that we have 2 black curtains designating wings, because the store was just an absolute natural for this. It's got this brick wall on the back, and even has some track lighting that we'll use. And then the door to the bathrooms and the offices backstage, and the door to the dressing rooms. So it's got a nice backstage area plus all of that through the doorway. It's great. And then the audience, well, the loft took out their clothing and left everything else behind. I'm talking about the numbers on their cash register, computers still lighting up. The telephone sitting and charging. They left everything behind Does anybody need hangers? I'm thinking coat hangers. Yeah, take some home, because we have thousands. I mean, we have an unbelievable number of hangers. Everybody could donate costumes to us and never bring a hanger. We'd be fine. Speaking of donating costumes, it is 6,000 square feet, and it was a retail clothing outlet. So all the sides of the building are racks, miles of racks with hangers. So we are going to be, we're being a little bit careful right now because of this 30-day eviction notice. We really can't invite donations until we have a backup plan, just in case. So we're well on our way to developing that backup plan for what we can move into one day, and one day soon if we have to. And then we will tell all the theaters in town that if they would like to donate their costume stock, because I do know there are some theaters that are paying $600 a month in rental for a storage unit. For storage units so small that you can't even walk through to see what you've got. I've borrowed from that collection once or twice. Fortunately, I cased the joint and I knew where to find them, but if I couldn't have climbed through and under and on top, they really need breathing room and they need a space. And so Theatre Santa Fe is the umbrella organization of all the theaters in town. And our mandate really is to be a service organization for the theater companies. We have 23 companies that have signed up for this year. And they all have varying needs. Some of the members, like Argos, is really a man of all trades and self-contained and can do everything that needs doing. Others, not so much. And some of them are kids theater. I mean, we have everybody under this umbrella. And so we're providing the opportunity for them to present, even the companies that are so small that producing for them is a big deal and they might do one show a year, they can be in our theater walk. But some of these companies really need us to step up and take hold of a costume collection so that all the theaters in town can access it. So that is one of our goals, it always has been. In terms of the actual venue that Argos, Oliver, my child, and I have built. Not quite single-handedly. Jennifer did a little taping, so did Deborah. We've had a few people. Mark Dunn, the playwright, came and painted some mine boxes. It's all been appreciated. So the problem being there is mall hours. Mall shuts down at 7 o'clock. We think that once we're there and we're showing our added value often enough, that we can probably work out something and eventually go to evening performances. But right now, it shuts down at the same time that everybody else in town is opening their doors. But not to be deterred, I think that a lot of our audience would really appreciate going to only 1 o'clock shows any day of the week.
Well, Talia, this production that you're doing of plays are at 1 o'clock, right?
Yes.
But it's one day only.
It's only one day.
So,
but what I'm actually looking for is some companies that might want to run lunchbox theater, whatever that looks like to them. Because I think that there is a market for that in this town. I think there are lots of people who don't enjoy driving after dark and would appreciate going to just matinees. So that's also a possibility, but more importantly right now it's providing one more venue for rehearsal, because sometimes that can get tight. There's a lot of things happening in town. They might have worked out their performance dates really well, but they can't get into that theater until the week before because somebody else is doing something. So they need some place to rehearse.
I have a question for both of you. Is there any more exposure to these playwrights than the opportunities that you guys are putting on? Is there any teaching, anything?
I mean, as in what are they doing while they're in town?
Yeah, is there anything supplemental that we could all participate in?
Unfortunately, there's only one of me. That's been
Well,
the problem.
then I
So I
realize
haven't
that's
been
why.
able to organize it. It's a great idea. Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Even
for the
just
idea.
meeting and talking with them, is
talk
that?
about fabulous female voices.
Yeah.
You know, I realize that you've been working so hard, Talia, that you are losing yours. So we
Oh,
don't
it's
want to
kind
strain
of, yeah, it's
too much.
sort of more than that. I swear I'm not contagious. I keep testing negative. And it's what happens when you send a 5-year-old to school.
Oh, that's
My husband and I are just constantly rotating, taking turns blowing our noses. Yesterday, the little guy had an ear infection, so I spent 5 hours in urgent care. And while I was in there with him, and I had a busy day, I was running, and he had to go to a rehearsal with me because I couldn't get home in time after that to get to. Anyway, I said, just for kicks, take my temperature. It was 102.8.
That's great. Well, thank you for being here. And what I'd like to do is, Deana, would you, first of all, I wondered if you wanted to give a little taste of Seven, seeing as how you have several cast members. Would you like to do just a small taste of one of the monologues?
Have any questions?
Well, I figure
That
maybe
would
we
be
could
one of
do a
my
taste and then questions
Okay.
afterwards.
Because I did want to mention that this is our set. We have rehearsal right after this. What you see is the set for Seven. Yeah, I think so. Eleanor and Cody picked out a couple things when we mentioned it, not to leave out Karima and Lori too, but
Well, seeing as how they're the farthest
okay.
from field, why don't we have Eleanor and Cody just do a small piece, and then we can open it up to questions from the audience.
These are mixed monologues, so each character tells part of her story and they continue like that. So there are a couple little pieces that they can give you a taste of part of what you'll hear.
Should I just start that?
Yeah.
Should we move off?
Yeah.
Should we move?
Okay. We have staging happening.
Actually,
on
Marina
site.
and Cody could sit in the
But, yeah,
director's
that'd be great.
chairs.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
if you could explain where your character is from to begin with, that would help.
Go ahead.
Eleanor and Cody are from Ecuador, even though.
Actually, I grew up in New Mexico, so I feel like I'm home.
I grew up in Connecticut.
So you're still living here.
Yeah.
So Cody, if you could introduce your character first, that'd be great.
My character is a woman named Marina Pislakova Parker, and she is from Russia. She was selected as one of the women by Vital Voices due to her work in domestic violence. She also works with a number of very important groups globally and is part of the Every Woman's Treaty project to try to bring some kind of recognition of women's rights and legal approaches to domestic violence around the world. So I don't want to give too much away about Marina, so this is just a little paragraph towards the end. My favorite time walking, believe it or not, is when it's snowing. Snowing makes it beautiful around Red Square. This is the time I put myself together to come to some harmony with myself, because if you are not in harmony with yourself, this is a very difficult job to do. When I started in 1993, there was only me, one crisis center in all of Russia. Now there are 160 crisis centers, shelters, organizations, a whole network. A little piece of me.
Eleanor.
Yes, and I am portraying Farida Azizi from Afghanistan. And as you can imagine, her life was difficult just being a woman in Afghanistan, and what she took upon herself and decided to do was to bring help to especially the remote areas of the country. So I'll read a little blurb here. If you start from 1980 in Afghanistan, where I was born, I was there until the age of 9. We had everything, but because my father was a doctor, we were in danger. He tried to help too many people, too many women and children crowding into our house under Russian rocket fire, until the day there came a hole into our living room. We had to flee Kabul and flee the Russians, and then flee the Taliban in 1993.
Fascinating stories. I hope you will come.
Thank you very much. Well, Deana and Talia, I think you both are very fearless females, and I would like to ask if anybody has any questions for any of these people.
When is Voices being performed?
When is 7 being performed?
Opening night is
Could
this
you sit
Friday.
in the director's chair, because it's being filmed.
Oh.
Okay. Opening night is this coming Friday, so we've got Friday, Saturday, and Sunday matinee. Following weekend is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Proceeds are going to the Esperanza Shelter, which is another personal part for me, because I had a sister who was being abused that we didn't know about, and so supporting those kinds of organizations feels like it. Thank you, Cody. Feels like it fits right into the purpose of doing this. When I came to Arcus to talk to him about 7 last November 1st, I looked in my journal, and he had looked at it and he said, yeah, we have to do this. And I said, well, how many performances do you think we could do? And he said, you never know. It's just kind of a gamble. And then he said, well, let's do 7 performances of 7. So I said, okay. So it'll be this weekend and the following weekend.
The Friday, Saturdays are at 7:30, but Sundays are a matinee at 2, if you'd like to come during the day.
Okay.
Spread the word.
All right, terrific, wonderful. I understand there may be an article in the Pasatiempo, is that correct?
I think so.
We're both hoping that.
Yeah, we did have.
Each of us was interviewed for our independent projects by the same person, so I don't know what to expect.
He said
We'll keep
Friday.
our fingers crossed.
We'll see, but definitely look at Pass on Friday.
See what happens
There will
on
be
Friday.
something.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Exactly.
they haven't had him spend time interviewing each of us without doing something with it. We'll just see to the extent.
Well, both of you have started theaters in different places. Both of you are still making theater. What is the most challenging part about making theater, A, as a female, and B, with no resources?
Well, you hit
That's
it
what we're
on the
used to.
head.
Deana, I'll let you go first.
Well, this is of course the first I've done anything in Santa Fe, so for me it was learning how it works. In fact, I think that was the first thing I asked you and maybe Marilyn Barnes. I said, how does it work here? Because I had been in Ecuador, there were no other English-speaking theaters, so I just kind of became the boss of everything. And so I said, well, we're going to have what we had plays in restaurants and all kinds of places. We finally found a venue, and so that made a big difference. That if we wanted to rehearse at midnight, we could. So when I got here, it was like, well, how does it work? You know, there are spaces, and then there are companies, and so learning all of that. But I think finding a venue, and for rehearsals and performances, is always a challenge. I don't know about being a woman. I've never really felt, maybe it's just because I'm Miss Bossy Pants, that was my name in the theater. But I've never really felt anything about that, but I think just funding and spaces.
And you came to Santa Fe from Canada?
I did.
And started from scratch.
7 years ago. So I happened to attend the inaugural meeting of Theater Santa Fe, the inaugural party for the community. And Barbara Hatch spoke. It was at Museo. And so I went up to her afterwards and said, how do I get involved? I want to help. Because I just knew I wanted to jump in. In Canada, I would have called myself equally a filmmaker and a theater creator. And here, I've kind of let the film part go. I have an agent and I'm an actor and I audition and send in tapes and things, but I'm not making films anymore. And I might start again. I'm not sure why I didn't, because they've got all kinds of grassroots organizations for independent filmmakers here as well, and Women in Film is there. And so I went to a couple of those things, but I just somehow was drawn to the theater scene here, and have spent all of my time making theater, and don't have any regrets on that. Most challenging thing? Making sure everyone plays nicely together. The people.
There are no.
Life is people.
There are no
You can't
personalities in
avoid
the
it.
theater.
It
No.
doesn't really matter. You can write your own little thing in private. I mean, I do a lot of independent projects. A lot. And spend a lot of time alone, and I like being alone and doing things. But I also really like being with people, so it's inevitable that you're going to deal with people. So I like getting to know people. I like seeing how people function. I like reading people. I like saying, oh, that's you. Okay, that's interesting. I do, you can turn off the tape. I do keep a short list of people that I like too much to ever work with again. I choose the friendship over the working relationship. There are times when sanity demands that. But really, it's the people. And this town is full of great theater people. Really fabulous theater people. And fabulous supporters of theater. Theater Lovers Club being high on that list. Really great supportive community. Jan?
Some of us watched Midsummer Night's Dream in prison during the film festival. We had actually a TLC event going on there. This just bubbles up for me, how this kind of a project can change people's lives. The men who did that play, and they were all men playing all the characters, were changed forever by their participation in another idea, someone else's story. Any plans to possibly leverage Seven into that kind of an adventure for women, perhaps in the shelter, or incarcerated, or our teens? It just allows a new perspective.
Well, these issues exist everywhere, not just in the countries of the stories we're
That's
representing.
kind of what I'm saying, yeah.
I did meet a couple of the playwrights for Seven, and when she found out that I was in Ecuador, she said, oh my gosh, I would love to get a Fulbright or something and come to Ecuador and go to the women's shelter, because we did donate everything from our performances there to the women's shelter, and get stories of these women locally and have them tell their stories. And so that was always kind of a back burner we never got to. But there are some really interesting offshoots to do something like that.
That's
Yeah,
great.
because the stories are everywhere.
Yeah, I always felt that a good place to sell scripts is at a show, and this occurs to me. I would love to have the book for my own personal use, and I could just see how if we sold them for whatever the cost was, for assuming that's okay, for people to read.
Oh,
and
sure.
there are a
Yeah.
lot of community leaders
Yeah.
that come to theater.
The
and
nice thing about the script too, the back of the book has the interviews of each of the women, so that you can see the full piece, and then you see the script of what was pulled out of those, which gives you even more insight into each of the
It's a
women.
little late for that idea, but something to think
Yeah, I
about.
don't think
If you
I don't
do-
think
if
you
you want
ordered
it
enough
again.
scripts.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
But
a
that's a good
great,
idea.
that's a great idea,
Yeah.
because I know even the women who have been in the play want to keep the script and have those stories. Yeah,
Theater
but
for
that's-
Change and social justice theater. I don't know whether you've done other social justice plays, okay, so, but it's a whole thing, right? And theater can be an amazing vehicle for social justice change. Augusto Boal out of Brazil, if you've ever heard of him, you can, Boal, you can Google his name and find out what he did. Theater of the Oppressed. He died not that long ago, so this is all still fairly recent work. He spent time in jail, but he went out into the community and kind of did guerrilla theater with people in the market and said, well, here, and got people to put on scenes. So he might have a couple of professional actors that are starting a scene, but they're in the market and people are seeing this interaction, and there's some kind of injustice being portrayed in what's happening. It's a husband and wife and an abuse issue, or it's a boss and underpaid worker or whatever. And then they stop the action and ask the audience, well, what do you think she should say back? How should she stand up for herself? What are we gonna do about this? And so it's a powerful, powerful tool to empower people.
I have seen a lot of street theater in India and also in Ecuador. Too, little groups will do exactly that sort of thing. Just start it and people gather around.
Are you planning on having any kind of talk back after any of these?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, you know.
Another idea, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, this is on Amazon. So that is a.
It's easy
That's
to get.
great news, everybody
Yeah.
heard that,
Yeah.
right?
Great.
Yeah, I know they have a lot of scripts themselves.
Well, I think we have to wrap it up,
Oh.
but we
Yeah,
have got one
rehearsal
more.
now.
There's one question right here.
I just wondered if there was any possibility of people from the shelter being able to get special encouragement or free tickets to come and see it. I just came last week in San Francisco. The San Francisco Symphony did a premiere of a new work called Shelter Intake Form, that the entire libretto was an evolution of intake forms for a homeless shelter,
Wow.
unhoused shelter, and the chorus, all 100 of them up at the front, were all people from
The shelters.
the shelters. Who, that part was very simple, and then the whole audience, it wasn't like here's 5 rows of the unhoused. They had tickets all through the audience of people that, I mean, one was in the box seat next to us, and Johnny said, I think maybe she's one, because I don't think she's bathed in quite a while, you know. But I loved seeing people that aren't normally at the symphony being there and being involved. And so I mean, this is a very different thing, people in shelters, but I wonder if there was any special outreach to enable the people that this is about here to come and see it.
It's a great idea.
It is.
It can
Next
still
time,
happen.
again.
If it's a thing that we could do it up, or, you know, if we're donating money to the shelter, maybe the shelter would like to have this as
Yeah,
an
I've talked to a couple of people at the shelter, of course, and telling them what we were going to do and asked them to be sure their staff knew. But that might be something interesting to call. I know sometimes there's a lot of protection issues.
I realize that,
Yeah,
but those who
bringing them
were
out,
able.
you're
Yeah.
sort of outing them.
In Ecuador,
Yeah,
we
it's
talked about that too, and they said, well, you know, we really don't want to disclose identities and, cause you never know who
And
else
they
might
could
be in
be-
the audience.
And they could be followed.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
user could be
So there are
followed.
some
They wouldn't
things
go.
like that, but,
You don't
I
go
mean,
with
if it
a
was
name
just,
tag.
you know, one showing that would be for that group in particular or something, it's something
Or
that
even
would
taking
be
a performance to
considered.
the
Yeah.
shelter.
To the shelter.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
great idea.
So, you know, we don't have to be finished after 7 shows.
No.
Well, I think that would be great. I think we so need to get a wider variety of people involved in theater, because I do see theater as a vehicle for social change
Yeah.
and as a voice for people. And so anything we can do to bring, I was a principal of a slum school in Anchorage. We always brought theater to the school and got our kids
Right.
involved in
Yeah.
theater. And it seemed, I do believe that theater changes people, like you mentioned with
Yeah.
the prison. So
It sure
I'm
does.
always pushing for getting people that don't normally go to the theater to get to see this piece.
Yeah. And there are some of us who would underwrite some of those costs.
Well, thank you.
Well,
On that note,
Yes.
I'm going to say thank you so much to our wonderful, wonderful presenters, Deana and Talia. Thank you so much for being here and telling us about what you do with so much courage and energy and just vision. And we really, really appreciate the fact that you're bringing us theater. Thank you so much.